Thank you, Mr. Nolan. This evening, Ms. Meliambro and myself are going to present our first part of the budget to the community. And this is an overview this evening. So at this point, school districts start to take all of the information that we've gathered from our staff internally, some of the information that the community submitted via the survey, the input survey, and we start to build our budget. And there are a lot of factors that are coming to us from externally that we have to then build into the budget. And so this evening, Ms. Meliambro is going to talk about some of those factors, including our tax cap calculation. So our budget timeline, and for the community at home watching, this presentation will be posted on the website this evening or first thing in the morning. You'll see there are a number of meetings. Some of these occur at work sessions, similar to this evening's meeting, where it's a one-item board discussion. And then some of them will occur within the context of a regular Board of Education meeting as well. So you see the timeline there, all culminating with May 18th. That's the budget vote and election. And we know that there are a number of factors associated with building the budget that are challenges, and they're variables that are not necessarily under our control. And they're all listed there. Some have much larger impacts on our budget than others. But you see TRS and ERS, that's the retirement systems contribution, medical insurance, and the tax cap, as I mentioned, that Tony's going to discuss this evening, student enrollments and staff retirements and state aid, and all of these things hopefully come to us over the course of the next several weeks.
So you can see in this graph of all the budget components what a large percentage of them are really contractually derived, and how, when you take into account salaries, benefits, and special ed directives, transportation requirements, the amount of the budget that is actually available for programmatic changes is actually relatively small. The teacher's retirement system is usually one of the major budget drivers, and just to give you an example of what an effect it can have on the budget, what I did was give you all the contribution rates from 14-15 to the current year and applied them all to a $38 million TRS payroll, which is approximately what ours is now. And you can see from year to year the large amount of impact that a change in the TRS could have on the budget. As far as the next year, 21-22, we're still sitting with the range of 9.5 to 10. We don't have the final number yet, but you can see compared to last year, it's relatively small change, which is good. And you can see that it would have an impact of about $200,000 depending on which way it went. To recap the budget for last year, the voter-approved budget was $88,692,494, and that represented an increase of almost $1.4 million. That was a budget-to-budget percentage increase of 1.59 and a tax levy increase of 1.8. The reason that the budget-to-budget increase and tax levy increase don't have to be the same is because we do have other revenue sources other than the tax levy. The state aid is one of them. We do have another few sources, but they can go up or down too. So that's why the budget change and the levy change are not identical. Just to give you an idea of the years since the tax cap was instituted in 2012-13, this is the average of the budget-to-budget increases and the levy increases, and they're much lower than they were years ago. Before the tax cap was implemented, you used to see budget increases of 3%, 4%, 5%. It wasn't uncommon. This is a summary of our reserves for the last 5 years. These reserve balances are all considered healthy, and the overall reserve balance gives us a great deal of stability. None of the balances are considered excessive by any accounting standards. They're all considered within best practices. You'll see the capital reserve, that is the one that we have utilized over the past few years, went up significantly from last year. We had a $2.7 million surplus this year, which was greater than usual because of the COVID shutdown. A lot of our services were not run in that 3.5-month period of the shutdown. So we applied a large amount of that surplus to the capital reserve. And that works well for us because the district does have a number of facilities projects that we're looking to address. And we have this reserve available to take the money from to do those projects. This is the basic tax cap levy formula. And what it does is you start with the prior tax levy, just to simplify it. You pull out what are called exclusions, and they are basically debt and capital. There are a couple of smaller items in there, but those are the two big ones. Then you have an adjusted levy to which the CPI is applied. The CPI increase is the actual CPI or 2%, whichever is greater. That gives you a tax levy limit before exclusions, and then you add back the current year exclusions to get your total tax levy maximum. This allowable levy growth over the past few years has been, well, this is what it's been. It was the lowest in 2016-17, and now we hit the 2% a couple of years in a row, and now we're coming down again. It's the second lowest since 2016-17. This is our actual tax cap calculation. It is an estimate at this point because I did mention there are a couple of minor factors that are not final yet, but the final number will not be significantly different. You can see our prior levy, and the tax growth factor is 1.0023. That's not very large. And towards the middle of the page in bold, you see the application of the levy growth factor, which is the 1.23%. And it results in a tax levy cap of 1.33. Our exclusions, you can see being subtracted on the top and added back in the bottom. They're not different from one year to the next. In some districts, in different years, they could be very different, and that would make their resulting levy increase go up or down significantly. At this stage of budget development, there are some things that are still not finalized. The state aid to us, which doesn't actually get set in stone until April 1st. The TRS contribution rate, as I mentioned before, we will probably know in a couple of weeks. Student enrollments and services are ongoing now. The class scheduling is being done. CSEs will be beginning, and then we'll know what services students need to be provided, if they need any out-of-district placements and things like that that we have to fund. And at any time, regulatory mandates can come up that we have to deal with, and we've had quite a few with COVID. And also COVID expenditures, we don't know, hopefully in a good direction, but we don't know where that will go from now until the end of the year.
So that's an overview of the tax cap calculation and just our budget process for this year. As the final component of that this evening, and I certainly want to thank Ms. Meliambro and certainly members of the business office staff who are here this evening as well, who've all been highly attentive to this process, and they've been thinking 21-22 budget probably since the summer already, or even before that. But if we look, our administrators, along with the Board of Education now, we're taking some of the feedback that we received. Mr. Davison is doing things like sectioning at the schools, and those will all come into play as we move forward through the budget process. So our budget codes, the way we're going to do it is take different components of the budget and present them in a format similar to what we did this evening. And there'll be opportunities for members of the public and the Board of Education then to ask questions on those sections. So our next presentation will be on the 23rd, and that'll be on the non-instructional areas, and that's a large range of budget codes that will be presented, and a large range of our budget will be presented at that time. And again, there's a bit of a gap between now and then, but there are a lot of unknowns at this point, as Ms. Meliambro mentioned. And we hope that with each budget presentation, we're learning some more of those unknowns because they're out of our control. They're coming to us, and then we can use those to refine the budget process. On the 9th of March, that's when we'll present information on curriculum and instruction, student activities, and student support services. On the March 16th meeting, we'll have a draft budget summary, the adoption of the board on the April 20th, as well as the property tax report card. The 4th will be a public budget hearing, and then May 18th, as we mentioned, is the budget vote and Board of Education trustee election. So at this time, we open it up to any questions from the Board of Education. Thank you.
Anyone on the board have any questions?
Yes, Brian, hold on.
Trustee Del Tato.
I circled something, hold there 1 second. Tony,
Can't hear you.
Tony?
Yes.
Can you go over on the calculation of the tax cap and the levy maximum? In theory, the consumer price index and the CPI increase. So you mentioned that it's going to be the greater of the two? Is that the right answer?
It's the actual increase is the CPI. Unless it's greater than 2, it's restricted to 2%.
Yeah,
So-
it's capped at 2%.
Correct.
If the
Correct.
CPI last year was what, 1.4?
1.8. Last year was 1.8.
Yeah, 1.3, 1.4.
Right,
So we
right.
were at 1.4 last year.
Pardon?
Last year we were at 1.3.
No, last year, our levy increase was 1.8.
So our consumer price index last year was 1.3, right?
No, no. The consumer price index slide is on
Slide number 10.
slide number 10. Okay, so last year, the consumer price index was 1.81. Our tax levy increase last year was 1.8. But that factor itself, you see the 2 years before it was 2.20. The actual CPI in those years was higher than 2, but it's limited to 2%.
Yeah.
It cannot be greater than 2%.
Yeah, I know that. I know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
John, you have another question?
No, I'm good.
Anyone else on the board? Questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you to Tony for the presentation, and also Ken.